Now, we hear a lot lately about the need to attract business to rural Ireland, but then there are some people who just do it without even talking about it. Evelyn O'Toole is the CEO and founder of Complete Laboratory Solutions, that's CLS for short, and she set up in the village of Rossmuck in County Galway in 1994. CLS is the largest privately owned contracted laboratory in Ireland. It provides sampling, analysis and fully trained microanalytical analysis to clients in the food, environmental, medical device and pharmaceutical industries. She's also this year's winner of the industry category of the EY Entrepreneur of the Year. I even had the absolute honour of presenting that title to her late last year. So she's my guest in the executive chair this week. Evelyn, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thanks, Bobby. It's great to be here.
Now, as I said earlier, I had the honour of presenting you with your award. What has that award meant?
It's meant an awful lot. It's brought a lot of recognition, profile especially, celebration, and probably a roller coaster of activity.
Great.
I might have thought I was busy last year and the year before, but now it's nuts altogether. It's fantastic.
Well, congratulations again. It's a great honour. Let's go back to the very early days. You're a Clifton girl, and I think you're from near Omey Island. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So
tell me about your background and your upbringing and your first job in a jewellery shop in Clifton.
Sure. So I grew up in a small village outside Clifton called Cushatraw. So it's the coast road to Cleggan, or very close to Omey Island. I became a science graduate through AIT and SIT. I went to the local school in Clifton Community School, and the first job I actually had was in a jewellery shop in Clifton. It was owned by a guy from Wicklow, and I was his stand-in salesperson.
Right.
I loved it, but Clifton goes dead around October, and I ran out of customers. And around that time, I kind of had a craving for something technical, because I guess I needed something scientific. So I think I would have cleaned the windows in a lab just to get inside a lab. And I was lucky enough to get a position managing a food lab. It was an aquaculture group at the time called Carroll's. And
was this after you were in the UK or before you went to the UK?
So I went to the UK in between AIT and SIT, and I tested industrial paints for 11 months, so almost a year. I chalked up a year's experience in between because I changed colleges.
Right.
And I went to Athlone to do toxicology, and I swapped over to environmental science. And it was interesting. It was a complete opposite to where I was going to, because London, I was doing I was bussing it and getting a tube to work in Mitcham outside London. And then I ended up actually hitchhiking from Clifton to Carna every day.
Did you?
Yeah, so that was 29 miles. I'd stand at the courthouse in Clifton and put my thumb out, and it was a completely different experience. Apart from the weather, Bobby, it was actually very enjoyable, because I got to know an awful lot of locals, especially dads who were bringing kids to school.
It's interesting you say that now, because you don't even see hitchhikers on the road anymore. And somebody who, and I remember even back in the college days, hitching here and hitching there. And I remember we used to drive out to Newlands Cross, and there would be maybe 40 or 50 people just beyond the traffic lights, waiting to get lifts out.
You just can't imagine that now, or you would think that these guys were a threat and you'd be afraid to pick them up, maybe.
That is amazing.
Yeah, but and I suppose at the time I used to make a commitment: when I get a car, I pick up everybody. But I bought a Peugeot 205 van, and that made me reliable and more predictable.
Right.
And so I was working there for 2.5 years.
This is in Carroll's?
In Carroll's.
Yeah.
So I was testing final product before I reached the customer, and I was their plant hygienist.
And that was the cigarette company Carroll's that went into fish farming. That's
the one. 44 million into the west of Ireland. It was a fortune at the time.
Yeah, wow.
And
And that building, or where you worked, was actually burnt down, is that right?
So that burnt down. I was 2.5 years there, coming home from an auction with my family. A second-hand auction in Claddaduff, and heard on the radio that a state-of-the-art plant had burnt down in Carna. We were the only state-of-the-art plant, so that was quite easy to work out. It was my job.
Wow.
That night we actually had a barbecue planned So we went ahead and had the barbecue. We all met and were miserable and had a few drinks together and swapped notes on what it's going to be like to be out of a job. So in the back of my mind, I guess my colleagues that I worked with were very kind and very supportive, and they all would have encouraged me and told me that I was really good at what I did. I felt I had a grip. I felt I had something special to offer. And in the back of my mind, I always felt I was going to do something in business.
Right.
I wouldn't have been obvious, or I wouldn't have looked especially good on paper. But in my own heart, I actually had a plan.
And the fact you were sort of pushed into it, I suppose, on the basis that the factory had burnt down, you got a redundancy sum, and here we go. It's now or never.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's almost like when you've nothing to lose, you can only gain. And I thought, if this works, it's good, because it gives me security and I don't have to depend on another company. And if it works well, I can bring in loads of scientists to work with me and live in the west of Ireland should they want a career there.
So that business then set up in Rossmuck in 1994. So it's been going a long number of years now. But like, in terms of employment in that area, there must be... There's very few people employing anything close to what you employ, is there?
I think we're the only company that's set up in Rossmuck in 24 years.
Yeah, wow.
I haven't had a business community. I didn't have a lobby group.
Right.
But, you know, with if you have a commitment to make something work, and I think if you don't even need all the skills, if you bring in people with you, share out the resources, share out the fun and the lion's share as well, I think anything is possible.
Right.
So I believe in inclusion and collaborative, and I had something different to offer because I understood results. I wasn't only a lab person, I was quite industrious. So I was good at problem solving. So our first was environmental and food. And then I actually had a plan for sustainability. And part of that plan was to develop into the medical and pharmaceutical industry. So we set up a plant in Galway City in 2008 for that. So again, it's micro testing.
So it's just a diversification within the same space, really.
Well, they're actually different markets. So it's micro and analytical testing and supplying fully trained analysts on contract to client sites that are our colleagues. And that's for sustainability. So that's my number one priority. I like something robust, so it can face down scenarios. So, for example, we've beaten off things like foot and mouth and BSE and a few economic turmoils. So, for example, when the economic climate turned down in Ireland, the environmental consultants would have fallen off very quickly.
Yeah, and
it's just to have enough market share in different areas that you're buoyant. So you can dip in one area. So we have 5 areas, and at any one stage, one area can be really going through a spurt of growth and the other area might be in review.
Let me ask you about an area of the 5 that I might know a little bit about, say the food area and testing of like we're all craving information around what is it we're eating, where does it come from, is it good for me, is it bad for me? In terms of the technology now that's available in a lab, is it easy enough to establish every single attribute? Like, I was often surprised that with the leaps and bounds that we've made around this area, that you could still have something like, say, the horse meat scandal, that something like that could actually happen. Just let me into that sort of world for a second.
Yeah, so our space would be food poisoning and food quality and things like shelf life testing.
Right.
So we would be the leaders in the country in the ready-to-eat section. So delis. Anything that's ready to eat for the consumer, either in a serve over or ready to eat in a shop that you actually buy. So dashboard dining and that whole area, or bring it home and it's ready to go. So we're looking at things like pathogens that might make you sick. So food poisoning, bugs and that. And we would go behind the scenes, unannounced, into premises. So for example, 2 of our flagship clients in there would be Topaz and Supermax.
Okay.
Who would have bought into kind of the program well before it just became legislation.
Okay.
So we would have a huge amount of kind of forecourt business and ready to eat.
And just tell me then how you work with them, Evelyn. What do you say there? You arrive unannounced into a petrol forecourt, and what do? You take samples of the food that's on display?
Yeah, so on the way in we would test things like raw material. That would be your ice and your water, and also your suppliers. So the clients that we have would have obviously approved suppliers, and then we would check what they get in that supply. So for example, if they were getting products with a short shelf life, we'd actually pick that up.
Okay.
So Bobby, you're getting your chicken wings with 2 days left on them.
Yeah.
And you have to display by probably the end of tomorrow. So it's to ensure that you reach the date on the pack. And measuring this area is just like everything else. Once you start measuring it and there's an awareness, everything improves. We would also do things like the hygiene of your surfaces.
Yeah.
We would sometimes take hygiene swabs of the operator's hands, so the food handlers, guys. We might try an implement. So one of their pieces of equipment, like a chopping board or a knife. And I suppose what we've seen is we trend the results. We have a traffic light system. There's single sites and then there's multi-site. So it standardises the multi-sites.
Right.
We've got online access of all our results, but we still resort to phoning somebody to tell them if something's wrong.
Just finally then, Evelyn, I suppose you're going a long time, since 94. You've grown the business. You won that fantastic award in the industry category at the EY Entrepreneur in 2017. Where are you going to take the business next? So
we're scalable as a company. We've got a lot of capacity to fill. Both sites actually have capacity at the moment. A lot of change in markets. I think Brexit will bring opportunities to the likes of us, oddly enough. So if the UK can't test products in the pharma space, then there's an opportunity for CLS to take in a lot more testing from the UK, because we'll be able to release into Europe from Ireland from after Brexit.
Okay.
So that's a nice opportunity.
Well, you strike me as a woman who knows what you're doing and who has a plan. You definitely have that. Evelyn O'Toole, CEO and founder of Complete Laboratory Solutions, that's CLS. Thanks very much for joining us today.